All right, we are rolling now. Counting us down. 3, 2.
You're listening to Missing Out with Lex Michael and Tauri J. Let's start the show.
Hello there, Misketeers. Welcome back to Missing Out. I'm Tauri J.
I am Lex Michael.
And if this is your first time listening, what we do here is we introduce each other to different media, whether it be movies, music, television, spoken word, books, experiences, things that have built us up as people, and we hope that in sharing it, it builds you up. We are the retrospective that is introspective.
And you know, Tauri J, under normal circumstances, this would be the week where I finally extract my long brewing revenge scheme for the time you put me in jail all those years ago. But in fact, we're doing something a little different that sort of precludes this possibility. We're not actually recording physically in the same location.
Right. Which I could assume is also your plan, and that you're lowering my guard that you're not here, but all of a sudden you will show up behind me with your knife ready or an axe or an incriminating photograph.
I'm really just banking on you not hearing me mumbling from your bathroom where I'm set up with my own personal podcasting interface. Like I brought all my shit over, set it up in your bathroom, hoping like I was like, he goes at like 10 a.m. and then I've got like a good like 3 hours where I will be able to set up and camp out here undetected. And I'm really banking on, well, now I suppose I'm banking on you forgetting everything I just told you so that I can extract my vengeance plot.
Your plan also assumes that I don't go poop every hour on the hour, so that's a nice assumption, I guess. Because I do.
I'm rolling the dice that you are very regular.
Right. And, you know, the fact that you paid so much attention to my schedule really means something to me. And it's really helped bring me to where I am today. So if you aren't aware, we are talking about the 1991 Denzel Washington vehicle Ricochet, also starring John Lithgow, Ice-T, Kevin Pollak, baby. This is produced by Joel Silver. The screenplay is by Steven D'Souza. I guess the original story was by Fred Decker, and it was originally written to be a Dirty Harry story, and then Clint Eastwood was like, hell nah. So yeah, that was...
I also do think it's it's fun that Fred Decker is the guy who directed RoboCop 3.
Oh, really?
So Fred Decker exists sort of within my wheelhouse. Obviously, he's got other credits to his name. He directed Night of the Creeps, and I think he worked on the Monster Squad also. But yeah, RoboCop 3 is my big sort of tether to Fred Decker.
Okay. Night of the Creeps was one that I was going to bring onto this show because it was another thing.
I've not seen it, so... Okay, so we can save that. We could definitely do that because I have actually not ever seen Night of the Creeps. But also another fun piece of pedigree for Ricochet, music by Alan Silvestri, who has done the music for a ton of movies, including, of course, the famous scores from Back to the Future and, of course, 3 out of the 4 Avengers movies. Like the Avengers theme is his.
Yeah. I mean, and you can hear the Back to the Future-esque nature of the Ricochet soundtrack, like especially in all of the sweeping shots, like when one of the characters gets kidnapped and they like pan the camera across a car and you hear that sweet orchestral Alan Silvestri score. You're like, yeah, that's what it is.
But so I want you to, because this was your recommendation for me, I want to hear your pitch because I watched this movie, I got a big kick out of it, and I know exactly how I would pitch it. But first, I very much want to hear your pitch. What is this movie to you, and why did you bring it to me? What is this thing?
So, I feel like because we are in a March Madness time, both because of the basketballs and also because at this point in time there is people are self-quarantining, which could drive one mad. I felt like this would be a good time to start the march into madness. And the first movie I
Ooh, I
thought
like it.
of,
We gotta.
go ahead.
Oh no, I was just gonna say no. We need to like soundbite that laughter and just pipe it in. Right, not well after this month. We just need that on file so we can pipe it in occasionally.
Okay, yeah, I'll make it its own little clip. You can have it as your background. Yep, that's how audio works. You can
Just gonna
have
make
it
it, yeah,
as
like every
your
time it's
text tone.
the sound will be my this. Yeah, the sound will be my computer wallpaper, so that every time I open my laptop, it just starts making the laughter sound.
Yeah, that'd be dope. You can either even get one of those like waveform tattoos where they like tattoo a waveform and then there's a reader and then it like makes the sound of that the waveform. So we can do that too if you'd like. But
This is very high. This is, I think, too high tech for my little peon brain.
aw, your brain's bigger than a pea. Don't worry about it.
But so as you mentioned, right, we are this month we're sort of stuck in we're recording separately because we made I think we made the executive call to do the responsible thing and sort of what is it, social distancing is the expression. It's a very uncertain time. I feel like we all need to be as responsible as possible, right? So we sort of made that call. The plus to this, the practical upshot of recording separately is that I don't have to put on pants. And I tell you what, like honestly, I really enjoy podcasting. I love doing this show, but a big drawback is that every week when we go to record, I have to put on pants and leave my apartment. And I'm trying to be positive in this very uncertain time. I actually think this is a huge win. And I encourage other people to social distance where possible, if for no other reason than you are absolved of the responsibility to wear pants. And is that not the dream?
That's true. Speaking of not wearing pants, I think I was going to incorporate that into my pitch where,
Not wearing pants?
yes. So,
Okay.
if you love Denzel Washington's body, you get to see him hella naked. In the first 10 minutes, he disrobes down to his skibbies and he's like, yo, look, I ain't got nothing. And then 5 minutes later, he's like, yo, you want to see my dick? Well, here it is. So that's, this is like prime Denzel Washington. He worked out 3 hours a day, 6 days a week for 4 months to get that rockin' body. So baby, 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 drink it in.
Is that true?
Yes, that's true. But also, if you want to see a really bonkers cat and mouse game, it would be this is the movie for you. We have paper gladiators. We have gonorrhea. We have let's see what else is good. We have a crazy.
I mean, I'm already sold.
I know.
Those are really the only two things I look for in movies.
Yes, there are a lot. There's a lot to love in this movie, and I also another reason why I brought it was that the main plot is that John Lithgow's character is trying to make it seem like Denzel Washington is going mad. He's essentially gaslighting him into a career suicide, and I felt like that was perfectly apt for this march into madness.
Is it? Oh, there it is. Is it because we've been consistently gaslit as a country? Is that why?
No, everything's fine. It's a hoax. Don't worry about it.
I wasn't gonna take it there. But so okay, yes, and I had never seen this, and I'm very glad you brought it to my attention because I think this movie is a total blast. I think it is. I watched it. I was watching it for the first half hour, and I went, "Oh, this is totally fun! Like, what a cool early '90s." It's sort of when Denzel Washington's career as a leading man was really just starting to take off. Like his next movie after this was Malcolm X. And so it was, that him and Lithgow together was appealing to me. And the longer I watched the movie, the more and more and more just absolutely batshit crazy it became. And so I was very very glad to have seen it. But here's what I kept thinking,
Okay.
especially the further into this movie I got. And here's my sort of non-spoiler pitch, and we'll get into the nitty-gritty when we drop the spoiler wall. But I would sort of pitch this as came out in 1991, so it predates both of these two movies that I'm going to compare it to, but it feels very much like The Dark Knight meets The Invisible Man, the new Invisible Man that just came out that I think like last week I talked about on Missing Out Monday. It feels very much like the early 90s sort of dry run for concepts that would come up later in both of these movies. So it's very much like The Dark Knight insofar as you have this very over-the-top, borderline megalomaniacal, psychotic supervillain whose goal is to sort of degrade and tear down and ruin the hotshot district attorney, largely just for the sake of it. Like, yes, it's revenge for the Lithgow character, but it's largely just like the way he does it. He does it that way just sort of for the sake of doing it that way. And then it's like the Invisible Man in as much as, like you say, like, so very early in the movie, the Lithgow character fakes his own death, and he's now sort of gaslighting our protagonist. And because the people around our protagonist believe the villain to be dead, he's able to sort of make our protagonist seem like the totally insane one, is able to turn his world against him ultimately. And so I just thought it was wild going like, oh, it's literally these two movies that I think are really good, except Ricochet did it all first.
Right. And I think that like that's probably what what drew me to it to begin with was that that I would call it Joker like relationship that they have, where it feels like, especially getting towards the end, where it almost has that energy of like, no one can take you down except for me. That kind of thing is
Right.
what I really dig. And so I don't feel like we can really move much further without going into spoiler territory. So I'm about to drop down the spoiler wall.
Okay, I want to just kind of tag up on what you just said, though. It's true. Like, there is a sort of almost like a Joker Batman relationship insofar as the way Lithgow plays it. And by the way, I've said, I don't know if I've talked about it on this show, but Sinister Lithgow is my favorite Lithgow. And the way he plays this character, Blake, he plays it so almost like a jilted ex. And that is so very like the Batman Joker relationship in so many incarnations. And so I think like, yeah, he's a very Joker-esque character. And yeah, like it feels almost like a proto comic book movie, I think, in a lot of, while also feeling very much like a sort of cop drama of its time,
Right.
like the very early 90s. But yes, let's drop down the spoiler wall. But yes, without spoilers, my review is this thing is bonkers, and I'm very glad I watched it.
Hell yeah. So if you have not seen Ricochet, you can do so. It's on HBO. It's on Hulu if you have the HBO package. If you have Cinemax, it's also on there. It's also for rent on Amazon. I'm sure that there are pretty cheap DVDs you can find. So if you go on IMDb, it'll tell you every place that it's available. So you can do that. And if you are feeling so kind, please go on to Apple Podcasts and leave us a rating or review, just so we can get to the top of the charts, help other people find this show, help us to keep growing, because as you know, the most potent form of advertisement is word of mouth. So I've said all the spiel I can spiel, and we will be back right after this break. All right, we are back. So, I wanted to do this thing. I don't know if I have a segment name for it, Lex Michael, and I'm kind of springing it on you. But
Okay.
last week when we were talking about Phantom of the Paradise, which is also another instance of a person going mad, I did a short recap. And I felt like that brought me a lot of joy. So I thought it would be fun to have the new person give their synopsis of the film or thing that they had just taken in. So if you were to synopsize or summarize this film in something I will call Bust a Recap, there he goes. That's the name of it.
Okay.
How would you do so?
Oh, geez. Okay, let's see. Let's work off of my notoriously bulletproof ironclad memory. We have our cop, right? Our cop protagonist. It's Denzel Washington. His name is Nick Stiles. Basically bringing a homicidal, notorious criminal named Blake, played by John Lithgow, to justice. And he does so, as you pointed out before we dropped the spoiler wall, does so ultimately by stripping almost entirely nude and magically pulling a butt gun, which is very exciting. Brings our villain to justice. So now, many years later, our hotshot cop has in fact become the district attorney. Is making some big sort of political moves, right? And he's sort of, he's when you become the district attorney, you're not just sort of enforcing the law, but you're also a bit of a politician. And so he has to sort of try and keep one foot in both worlds. Now, while all of this is going on, and while, for example, our character is raising funds for things that district attorneys do that they need all that money for, our villain, Blake, who has been biding his time in prison, during a parole hearing, busts out of jail in collaboration with like a white supremacist faction. And by the way, the sort of jailbreak sequence during this parole hearing is so deeply vicious and violent and aggressive and out of nowhere that I am like, Tari, and if you're listening to this show and you've listened to this show before, I get a big kick out of nowhere, truly aggressive, belligerent, bonkers, what the fuckisms. And I was sitting there going, holy shit. Like, it just is so aggressive, so out of nowhere. So our villain busts out of prison, basically offs everybody who assisted him in that escape, with the exception of his little boy sidekick. And I love that our Joker, like, if we're going to make the comparison, John Lithgow is sort of our Joker, but I love that Joker in this movie sort of has his own Robin, who is the one guy that for whatever reason he won't kill. And so Blake proceeds to orchestrate this massive psychological warfare campaign in the name of revenge against Nick Stiles, the former cop, now DA, who put him away. And the machinations therein are absolutely fucking wild. And they extend to, but are certainly not limited to, arm wrestling Nick Stiles into essentially a stalemate wherein they can forcibly inject him with heroin, and then put, I guess, like a prostitute sort of on top of him to give him gonorrhea, so that like all of these elements, like, they put it on film, they shoot it, or they put it on video, and they get that out into the world to make sure that before we kill you, we want to make sure that the knife has just been stuck in and twisted as hard as possible, as long as possible. It's not just about killing you, right? And this is very Joker-esque. It's sort of about sending a message, not just to you, but sort of to the rest of the world, that, okay, you know what, Nick Stiles, hotshot district attorney, former hero cop, no, not only is he not any better than the rest of us, but in fact, he's far worse. I'm going to take your world from you. I'm going to take your career from you. I'm going to take your family away from you. And then when Gotham is ashes, then you have my permission to die, and stuff like that. And it's that story. It's that cat and mouse game of, can Nick Stiles sort of reclaim his innocence? Can he reclaim his world? Can he reclaim his life before Blake completely tears it all down? All right, how'd I do?
That was great. I say that recap was thoroughly busted.
It's insane though, man. Like, around the time where we got to the arm wrestling, I feel like I started to key into what this movie actually was. But I wasn't, you know what I mean? Because like for the first, the whole first act of this movie, it's entertaining,
Yeah.
but it's an entertaining early 90s sort of cop drama. And a big part of why it's entertaining is you see sort of Denzel at that point in his career, you see Lithgow, you see like when Kevin Pollak shows up and stuff, especially these sort of like semi-dramatic cop movies where like he plays the cop partner who's got the sardonic wit and stuff like that. Like I'm actually a fan of, to me, Kevin Pollak as the cop partner who displays sardonic wit all over the place. That's almost a trope at this point for me as an audience member. So I'm always happy to see that. But the first act is sort of doing one thing, and then you get to where Blake is able to capture Styles, and then we do the arm wrestling. And like I said, like I started to go, oh, okay, like maybe this movie is not exactly the movie that the first act presented itself as, and in a very positive way. And so they do their arm wrestling, right? And of course, Nick Styles sort of first wins handily. But then Blake sort of flips the tables on him by putting his hand down on the table, and then has his little buddy, his little Joker Robin, come in. Or more like, I guess if we're going to do like, if it's 1989 Batman, he's the Jack Nicholson Joker, and I guess his buddy is like Bob the Goon. Has him run over and inject Denzel Washington with heroin. And at that point I went, oh, okay, this is just utterly bonkers cinema. And this is not just your sort of run-of-the-mill standard cop and criminal caper. This is the movie where the criminal injects the hero with heroin and makes sure he gets the clap.
Right.
More movies like this, please.
So two things in response to what you just said. One,
yeah, I just said a lot.
I like that the first 30 minutes just spend time just almost world building / character developing. If you hadn't seen the commercial, you weren't familiar with where it was going, you would just be like, oh man, like it's just a bunch of fun character stuff. And it's, as you were saying, like entertaining enough, and like they establish the politics of the world and what's happening in both the prison system and also the politics of the judicial system. But I feel like for me, the part that I knew that it was going to be bonkers, just at least on this review, because like when I was growing up, the main thing I remember is, yes, the what I call the torture scene, where we get the heroin and the rape and the like torture and all that stuff. But the first part for me where I was like, what the fuck is this movie, is when we get the I guess what I would call the phone book gladiator scene, which I guess if you if you don't know, I think it was the director also directed Highlander, and so that scene was almost a visual recreation of the final battle in Highlander.
That's amazing.
Yes, this movie is insane. Like it kind of primes you for it when he being Denzel starts taking off his clothes in the middle of a hostage negotiation, and you're like, that's weird.
Like, really,
but
like I wasn't ready for that at all.
Yeah.
Like you sort of get what he's going for, but at the same time, it's like, man, you're going for it so hard, and you're taking such a gamble,
Yeah.
right? Especially when he goes like, look, here's my muscular, glistening chest with no chest protector on it. I mean, you're really banking on the fact that you can bluff this dude hard enough that he is going to be frozen in his tracks by your chiseled, beautiful masculine form, that you will have the time you need to reach to your secret butt compartment and pull your pistol. It's fundamentally insane.
Right.
And the fact that it works is proof positive that like not only is there a certain level of awareness that this is insane, but that the movie is now sort of priming you for it to double down on how insane it is. And it's so, because like, if it didn't deliver on that promise, I would have walked away from this movie disappointed. You know what I mean? Like it seems like, okay, you're no, but like seriously, like, oh, you're setting up a reality within this story that is absolutely batshit crazy.
Right.
And if it's only the first act of this movie where you follow through on that, then you sort of drop the ball. You know what I mean? Like, you don't deliver on the promise of your first act. But I mean, holy shit, does this movie deliver on the promise of the first act and then some? I mean, shit, we didn't even talk about yet the fact that part of Blake's plan is not only to discredit Styles. It's not just to. I mean, the way you put it is entirely accurate. Actually, there is there is a rape scene in this movie, but it's not. When we talk about rape scenes in movies, it there's a very specific sort of picture that gets painted mentally of what that looks like. And the scene in this movie where they drug him up and they have sort of a prostitute have sex with him to give him venereal disease. Yeah, that's a thing that happens in this movie. It's I mean, that's what we're looking at. We're essentially looking at a rape scene. It's just that we don't necessarily talk about rape scenes we talk about them in very specific terms.
Right.
And I thought it was very interesting that that's explicitly what is in this movie. And yet I just, for reasons that I don't think we necessarily need to get into here, it doesn't necessarily read that way, or certainly I don't think would have read that way to an audience in 1991 when the movie came out. But not only is that a fixture of Blake's plan, part of his plan is also to plant child pornography on Nick Styles' person. Like, I think they put it in his briefcase or something. So not only are we giving you VD, not only are we injecting you with heroin, but we're also setting you up to appear as though you are a child pornographer of sorts. Like, this movie is fucking bonkers.
Right. Yeah, and I want to circle back to this idea, because you were talking about how we generally view like a rape scene in media, and I feel like this is kind of something that is, I don't know, it's something important to kind of dive into a little bit, in that I do think that generally, and because we live in a patriarchal like rape culture, and that like a lot of the times the victims of rape are women, and I think that also it is heavily overlooked how many men are also sexually assaulted. And so I think it's interesting to see that, like, one, it was never in this movie called rape, and people were actually mad at him for having had having been assaulted. Like, he's like, I would never have done it, and his wife is like, how dare you? Your penis was so excited to have sexual relations. And it's
that
like,
was so right. Oh, that exchange was so wild to me, especially because in the first act, you see, like, what is it? I think the bulk of the story, or the after act one, it's kind of set like 8 years later, something like that.
Yeah.
But in the first act, you see him meet the woman who becomes his wife, and they have 2 daughters together. And you sort of see that relationship develop. And that's why when we get to the exchange that you're talking about, where she's like, he's like, I wouldn't, this isn't me. I wouldn't do this. That if I had any control of myself, that there is no way I would betray you in this fashion. And she's like, yeah, well, you know what? If you got the clap, that clearly there were a few inches of you that weren't resist. I was like, holy shit.
Right. I mean, and there is an SVU episode. I'm turning into Yell Teagle. Shout out to Yell Teagle, love of SVU.
Whoop, whoop.
But there's also an SVU episode. It's not about male sexual assault, but it is about this girl who her boyfriend had set her up to be gang raped by this gang he was trying to be initiated into. And he was mad at her because she, like, your body will react. And so she ended up having an orgasm in the midst of being gang raped. And so he was like, you never did that for me. And it's like, bro, bodies do stuff. Like, you can't control it. That's not how it works. And so like,
Should we put a content warning at the top of this episode?
oh yeah, it's going to be in the description.
Well, the thing is, like, right, like, you can, I guess I should have thought about this ahead of time, but it's really difficult to discuss the actual content of this movie without dipping into some pretty heavy shit.
Right.
But that is just a testament to how absolutely bonkers this movie is and how committed to being that bonkers this movie is.
Yeah. And so like, I think my biggest thing, like, I really liked the execution of the plan because they establish that what is his full name? Earl Talbot Blake, which you have to say all three names. But
Yes.
they establish that he's a budding hitman, and then you really get to see all of those hitman skills, like him infiltrating the house and also him intercepting the I believe the guy's name was Ferris, who was depositing the money and all that stuff. Like, you really get to see him doing all this sweet espionage. I also love this moment when he is posing as a homeless guy, and Ferris essentially is like, fuck off, get a job. And he's like, we're human, I'm not scum. And I was like, it's true. He's a human being. Treat him like a human being. But my one thing is that I just wished that people had given Denzel's character the benefit of the doubt. And it like, I think from my current perspective, I can say, like, yes, there's a whole one. I guess the movie wouldn't have worked if they believed him offhand, but also like them not believing
it. No movie at that point.
Right. But also them not believing him has this like extra layer of, I guess, intersectionality in that he's a black man who's rising in the ranks, but he's also a black man from the hood. And so people are just waiting for him to screw up, and people are waiting for him to confirm the worst parts of what they think that he is capable of.
And that's actually, we haven't talked about the Ice-T character yet, who's his, like, the character's name is Odessa, I believe, who's, like, his childhood friend.
Yeah.
Who, you constantly, like, that character, I think, in large part sort of exists as a consistent reminder that, Denzel's character, no matter how far he's risen, sort of comes from a world where, like you say, I think a lot of people who don't really understand the world that he comes from are maybe more likely to be suspicious of what his actual intentions, motivations, what his true actions are versus what he says they are. And I think, like, one, it's very smart to sort of write a character into this movie where you can sort of dramatize that through a relationship as opposed to it just being something that the characters talk about. Also, Ice-T seems to be having a very good time in this movie, and I was having a very good time watching him as well. Like, honestly, like, I feel like you could technically take that character out of this movie and still tell the same story. I'm really glad that he's there, because he sort of gives life to this other aspect of the Nick Stiles character's personality, of his background. It informs who he is moment to moment, and then you can actually see in his relationship with that character, with his childhood friend, you can sort of see how these two elements of his identity are consistently at odds with each other. Mm-hmm. And how, by extension, when you have these elements of your identity that are constantly at odds with each other, not just in your mind, but in the minds of the people that are observing you, that are observing you personally and professionally, you are now then even more susceptible to having doubt cast upon you if somebody like Blake, somebody like the Joker, wants to sort of tear your entire world down. And I thought that was a really savvy decision on the part of the screenwriters to have a character in there where you could actually dramatize that aspect through a relationship. And like I said, I think Ice-T is very clearly having a ball doing this movie.
Oh yeah.
And so he's really entertaining to watch.
Yeah. I also really like the scene where Ice-T and Denzel Washington are basically trying to broker this deal where Denzel Washington, his character Styles, is essentially trying to make it so that this child center that he's trying to build isn't in the territory of people who are selling drugs. And he is really vying and fighting for the future of the kids who he's trying to make sure that they grow up better than he did or Ice-T did, and trying to give them a chance. And I really liked that exchange. It reminded me of, I want to say it's season 3 of The Wire, where they were essentially like, well, we can't stop you guys from selling drugs, but we can make it so you confine you to this one area so that everyone else isn't affected.
Yes. Yes, that's season 3 where they do Amsterdam.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's interesting. That's an interesting point of comparison.
I assume that idea came from this movie. I assume they were like, yo.
It's entirely possible.
I'm saying this is a like an HBO Pictures film, and I think that HBO was they originally produced The Wire as well, right?
Yes.
See, it's all connected.
I want to say a good 10 years after this, but yeah, I mean it's all in house, so it's definitely not. In fact, it's not even necessarily unlikely. Like David Simon talks about how a great deal of what was in The Wire was based pretty directly on real shit that was going on in that world in Baltimore. But at the same time, it's all in house, and I know that they never. In season 3 of The Wire, they basically construct they call it a free zone. It comes to be known as Amsterdam, where you could basically, they want to funnel all the sort of drug and criminal activity into one neighborhood, so that they can clean up the rest of the streets. And maybe eventually, if they kind of funnel everything in one direction, they can ultimately sort of turn on the people they made this deal with and sort of arrest everybody in one fell swoop. Now, to the best of my knowledge, nothing like that ever necessarily happened in real life. But I would imagine, yes, these ideas have to sort of come from somewhere. And even though I don't know that they would necessarily have lifted that from this movie, I think it is very interesting to note the similarity of the concepts and how they are both HBO productions.
Right.
I think that's an interesting thing.
Yeah. Speaking of connections, so apparently this movie was supposed to be in the same universe as Die Hard. So we have the reporter character who is in both of them.
What is it, the Mary Ellen Trainor character?
Yeah, so that character is in both this and Die Hard. And then I think there were a couple other characters that appear in this, but eventually become different characters as the Die Hard series goes on. So it eventually falls out of line with that universe. I'd like to think that it basically, the moment it split was when the escape happens, and in the Die Hard universe, it continues on in their timeline based on the Klans member killing Earl Talbot Blake. But in the Ricochet universe, Earl Talbot Blake comes out on top. So it's like a whole big switcheroo. You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying.
See, and I feel like now that there's actually and that's the thing. It's not like, this isn't one of those things where we sort of spin a yarn and wouldn't it be fun if these two were connected? It's literally meant to be the same character, right? Like the character name is the same.
Yeah.
Gail Wallens, I believe, is the name of the character. So in a world where this movie is actually very literally directly connected to Die Hard, I feel like we really missed out on a movie where, say, maybe Nick Stiles and John McClane team up. But why do they have to team up? It's because they're facing a threat that neither of them could overcome alone. And it's a movie where where Blake and Hans Gruber team up to execute not just a $1 billion terror heist, but also a sort of psychological warfare campaign to take down both of these characters. Now, obviously, you can't make that movie anymore because we very sadly lost Alan Rickman a few years ago. But I feel like that's the grandest missed opportunity here. Like, that would be like, we wouldn't need the Avengers in a world where that movie existed. You know
Right.
what I mean? Like, everybody would be like, oh yeah, like Marvel, whatever. Give me the Die Hard Ricochet crossover that we've always demanded and always deserved and never got. That's exciting. That's why I get up in the morning is so that I can eventually I can get to the end of my day envisioning a movie where Denzel Washington and Bruce Willis get into fisticuffs with the team of John Lithgow and Alan Rickman.
Right. I mean, I have to imagine like there were plans for that to happen, and maybe even because in which one is it? Is it With a Vengeance that has Samuel L. Jackson in it?
Yes.
Maybe there was a chance that that was originally going to be the what is the it was originally supposed to be Nick, and then they were like, oh man, we got to rewrite this because Die Hard 2 wasn't good, so let's do something different. So instead of teaming him up with another black cop, they were like, we'll team you up with this black nerd. That's what happens in the third one, right?
Sort of, yeah, kind of, and they fight Jeremy Irons. And the other fun thing about Die Hard 3 is that for most of the movie, all of the sequences with Jeremy Irons sort of feel like you were watching one movie and then changed the channel, and then you got this whole other thing, and then you change channel back, and it's John McClane again.
Interesting.
I think we were robbed of the timeline where Die Hard 3 was the crossover with Ricochet.
I mean, I'd watch the shit out of it. You know what I'm saying? Just those two bouncing off each other, because I have to assume, has Denzel Washington and Bruce Willis done a film together? Because I know that notoriously Bruce Willis is a hard guy to work with. Yes. And I assume that Denzel Washington, he's so careful about his persona that I think that like he totally just either put Bruce Willis in his place, or he would handle it and be so diplomatic about it. But then you'd hear stories coming out where you're like, Denzel fucking punched Bruce Willis in the face and we had to stop rolling for 3 weeks while his black eye healed or some shit. That's what I want.
I haven't seen it, but there is a movie that came out in '98 called The Siege, which stars Denzel, Annette Bening, Tony Shalhoub, and Bruce Willis. I have not seen it, so I do not know if anything resembling the scenario you describe comes to pass. But they did apparently do a movie together at one point.
Okay. I wonder if I've seen this. The title sounds familiar.
I'm looking at the credits now. Apparently, Lance Reddick is also in it as FBI agent Floyd Rose, which, honestly, like Lance Reddick being the great actor he is, and that character name just being so beautifully on point, I'm actually very disappointed. Knowing nothing really about The Siege, I'm very disappointed that we didn't get a whole series of Lance Reddick as FBI agent Floyd Rose movies.
I mean, you could effectively assume that every agent he plays is the same character, but he just gets different names as he like moves from city to city. So FBI agent Floyd Rose was later promoted to be the character that he is in Fringe, who also took a little time to take just a short couple episodes on Lost. But before all that, before he got promoted into the FBI, he was part of a small precinct in Baltimore.
Yes, where he rose through the ranks, and that's eventually how he got tapped. And then finally, he decides to sort of retire from law enforcement, take what he perceives to be a slightly sleepier, sort of more retirement-friendly job as the concierge at a hotel of some note. And then John Wick shows up, and suddenly he's on one side or the other of an assassin war. Uh, but we don't know which side till John Wick 4 comes out. Oh
Oh,
shit!
no spoilers though. I haven't seen the second one or the third one. So, hey, keep those
Oh, they're
spoilers to
good.
yourself.
They're fun.
I'm aware. Everyone keeps telling me that they're very good. Everyone's like, oh
The
man,
third one
John
has
Wick,
dogs.
it's a revelation. I know. And there's a horse at some point. Look, I know. No spoilers.
But anyway, yes, I like this. I like the Lance Reddick cinematic universe that we're building.
Well, yeah, he's the Nick Fury of it all. He'll just pop in and be like, "Ooh, Nick Styles, we need you for our new initiative." That's how he talks, in case you were wondering.
It's like it's like Rise of Skywalker, where he's talking to the briefing room, and he's like, "Our worst fears have been realized. Somehow Stringer Bell returned," and everybody's like, "Oh no!" Shit.
I would also watch that. I mean,
I would watch the shit out of that. If that movie was available, I'd be like, no offense. I'd be like, why the fuck am I talking to you? I could go watch that. I'd be like, why are you talking to me? We could both be watching that right now.
But yeah. Do you have any last thoughts about this movie and yeah, that's it. Do you have any last thoughts about this movie?
You know what? Somebody I do want to shout out. So there are a few scenes, and a lot of it is relatively pretty early in the movie, where we have scenes with this sort of like sort of arm of a drug cartel, right? Like that eventually the Blake character sort of turns on and he kills them all and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But a couple actors in those scenes that I want to shout out. Obviously, Miguel Sandoval is one of the actors in those scenes, and he's got a huge career. But I want to shout out in particular an actor who is in those scenes who I'm not even sure if he has dialogue, but physically, his face, he's prominently featured in these scenes, is an actor by the name of Thomas Rosales Jr. And I want to shout him out because he is an actor who, if you do not know his name, you almost certainly know his face. I want to say he started as a stuntman in the 70s, but since then has worked on so very many movies. And he's an actor who, for years, I'd be watching stuff and he'd show up and I'd be like, oh my God, it's that guy. What is that guy's name? And eventually, I made it a point to look it up. Thomas Rosales Jr., like I said, started in the 70s, but he has something like 170 something film and television credits, including, I made a partial list. And by the way, this is only a partial list. Ready? Here we go. Combined film and TV credits. Ready? Nighthawks, Cagney and Lacey, TJ Hooker, Commando, Magnum PI, Airwolf, The A-Team, The Running Man, MacGyver, RoboCop 2, Predator 2, Kindergarten Cop, Universal Soldier, Last Action Hero, The Crow, Beverly Hills Cop 3, Speed, Heat, a movie we talked about a couple of weeks ago, Last Man Standing. He shows up in that. LA Confidential, Face Off, Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, and super recently, and he's still working to this day, I think Spencer Confidential, the Mark Wahlberg movie that just dropped on Netflix, he's in that as well. So I wanted to shout out this actor because like his body of work is massive. You have definitely seen him. If you Google Thomas Rosales Jr., you might see his face and go, oh yeah, oh my God, that actor. And I feel like he's sort of like this great unsung fixture of cinema over the course of the last couple of decades. So I wanted to make sure that I shouted him out because I feel like more people should be shouting out Thomas Rosales Jr. because he's got this massive career, but we don't all know his name and stuff. So I like the idea that I can shout out that guy because I feel like a guy with a career that big, that sort of widespread over TV and film for several decades. I feel like more people should know that dude's name. So shout out to Thomas Rosales Jr.
Okay, nice. While you were talking, I remembered that I wanted to give.
I was doing other things.
Yes. No, I remembered that I wanted to give a PSA that just a public service announcement, everyone. If you witness a videotape of a man in your house threatening your daughters, and you're also under suspicion of doing a bunch of negative things, and that specific guy is believed to be dead, and probably that videotape will you know, alleviate all of these charges, maybe grab the tape. Maybe grab the tape. Maybe like grab it on your way out, even if you're grabbing your gun, and grab the tape. Maybe do that. What if you did that? I don't know.
To be fair, you and I live in a post Ricochet world where we can learn from the mistakes of Nick Styles, whereas Nick Styles was living Ricochet and therefore could not learn from his own mistakes in the moment.
No, I would have been like, yo, this is my freedom. And as a black man, he should know anything that's your freedom, you fucking grab. You don't hesitate. You do it. You take it in hand. You run down the street with the tape and your gun, even though you didn't need to run in your robe. If you had time to grab your gun, you had time to grab some pants. But whatever, neither here nor there. Grab the evidence. Grab the thing that's going to keep you from going behind bars. My dudes. Also, if someone shoots your best friend and throws a gun at you, do not catch that gun with your bare hands. Please don't do that. Please let the gun fall.
That's a good...
Yeah.
Also, not for nothing, spoilers, I guess. We're well past the spoiler wall. Kevin Pollak's death in this movie just brought me so much happiness because it just felt like, here's what people are talking about when they talk about sort of cornball cop movie stuff. His sort of line where it's fine because like Kevin Pollak's a funny guy. Also, sidebar of a sidebar, I love that they let Kevin Pollak do a couple impressions in this movie. Like they let him do a Captain Kirk and they let him do Peter Falk as Columbo. Yeah. And these are two impressions that like Kevin Pollak does, you know what I mean? So like I thought that was fun. But his sort of death where John Lithgow has shot him from the fire escape and Denzel Washington is cradling him and he's just like, I guess Blake was alive after all, or how could he have killed me? And it's so good. It's so good. Like in the least ironic way possible, I got such a fucking kick out of that moment.
Yeah. I dug it too. Like I feel like if I were to die, it would have to be something baller like that. I miss the old days before it was cliche to have like these cool like lines. I know that they're now seen as cheesy, but also the line that that Denzel Washington had after Talbot or Blake falls on the spike and he's like, I guess you get the point. And it's like, fuck yeah, kill that bitch, yeah. That's I missed that.
But also too, like you talk about that line, and I had the same moment where it's like, think about like the corniest, cheesiest sort of James Bond one-liner, and it's that dialed up to 20. But I think it's proof positive, right? Like we talked about earlier how this is, you know, Denzel had done a number of movies before this. You know, like Glory was a big movie for him, and that was several movies before this for him, you know, and Malcolm X was next. But it's so clear. I mean, from the very first scene in the movie, it's even before he starts to strip down and it's like, oh, okay, it's like that. It's so clear that this dude is a movie star. You know what I mean? Like
right.
It's so like, it's not you don't sit there going, it's so weird that his career went where it went. Like watching his performance, even just in the opening scenes of this movie, it would have been really weird if his career hadn't gone where it went, because the dude is such a movie star and he's such an actor that, you know, when you get to that moment at the end where he's got the cheesy, what is it like? It looks like you finally got the point, Blake, or whatever it is. You just go, you know what? Yeah, Denzel, he did get the point. God damn it, you're right. And shit. And it works. It shouldn't work. You know what I mean? It shouldn't work. That line should be so cringy that it sort of breaks the last act of that movie. And yet he is such an actor and such a fucking movie star, even then, that it just works. Like somehow he is able to carry this story, which really in the hands of an actor just a hair less capable than Denzel Washington. I mean, I think the whole thing falls apart. I think it's just tonally such a potential nightmare because it is so sort of standard cop drama, then so sort of light in certain places, and then so just aggressively, committedly dark as fuck in other places. And he has to be the guy who sort of threads that needle. It all hinges on, even more than on the script, it all hinges on his performance to make it work and to make it feel like all of these pieces are part of one coherent whole. And so it's just such a testament to Denzel as an actor, even then, even before he was Denzel Washington, the way, of course, he is now. It's such a testament to his capability as an actor that he's able to sort of thread that needle. Because, like I said, if you hired somebody to play that part who was just a hair less capable than Denzel Washington, I think the entire movie falls apart. And I think it's so, like, I'm so glad I watched this because I'd seen, like he made Glory before this and I'd seen him in Glory and he's amazing.
Yeah.
But, this sort of coming out before Malcolm X, like this is one of the earliest leading man performances from Denzel that I've seen. And it's just so, like, this guy is sort of just genetically engineered, it seems, to be a movie star. And it's not just that he's got that star power, it's that he's actually an excellent actor. Like, the foundation is that he's an excellent actor, and then he's got that star quality on top of it, and it makes the whole thing come together. Then, of course, Lithgow's a genius as well, but it's a testament to how powerful that dude was, even relatively that early in his career.
Yeah, I agree. I think I'm going to sign off by giving two lines that I think I would have substituted for his ending line, and if you have any, please share them with me. But I think one, after the initial electrocution of Earl Talbot Blake, he would have been like, "Looks like the news is going to be pretty shocked." Or after he fell onto the needle, he could have been like, "I guess you're getting the needle this time, Blake." Those are, I think, what I would have gone
shit.
with. Yeah. But I mean, the second one being pretty dark.
Yeah, I just would have been like, look, Denzel, how about this? You have fun with it. And I would let Denzel go and just improv for a few takes. And then I would have been like, all right, Denzel, we're probably not going to use this. But I just for me, can you give me one where you're just like, buck your face, my guy? And that would be, I'd tell him that I just want to hear him say it like it's just a goof. And that's the one I'd put in the movie.
For some reason, I thought you were gonna be like, I wanted a personal shout out from Denzel Washington, so I'd be like, just this one, like apropos of nothing, like this is just part of the process. But as soon as he dies, yell out, "Lex Michael is the best," and give a nice thumbs up. Yeah, definitely do that one.
Be like, this will make sense in like 20 to 30 years, or just be like, here, ready? You just want to fundamentally break the reality of the movie in the last minute. So what you do is he hits the needle, and in that scene, obviously, like, Styles is sort of hanging off of just sort of like an arm of this like tower that came down, and he's sort of hanging while he says it. But what I want, here's what I tell Denzel we're definitely not putting in the movie, and then I definitely put in the movie. He impales Blake on the needle, and then he just lets go because presumably Denzel is standing on something just below frame. So he just lets go of the thing, but doesn't fall, starts applauding, and then he goes, "Guess you're the one with the clap now." And I go, "Cool, cut." He's like, "Cut." I go, "Okay." And Denzel's just like, that was ridiculous. And I'm like, I know, man. I know. I wanted to loosen everybody up. There's no way that's going in the movie. And then the night of the premiere, that's what's in there. And Denzel just sort of turns to his right, looks at me like, not only am I never working with you again, but you will never work, not just in this town, anywhere ever again. And I'll be like, worth it.
I like to imagine that also in that moment, you're giving him like a tiny clap. He's like, I see, I understand. Kill this man. All right. So that.
But then Denzel sees me giving the tiny clap in the theater, and he goes, "Oh, you know what? I get it now." And I'm like, "I know, Mr. Washington. I know."
Oh man. Okay, so everyone at home, why don't you tweet us what your ending line would be? You can do so at Missing Outcast. That's MISSINGOUTCAST. But you can also give Lex Michael the clap on social media here.
Please don't give me the clap anywhere, ladies and gentlemen. But if you want to share other things, I'm on Twitter and Instagram at the Lex Michael.
Awesome. And if you'd like to give me a thumbs up or you'd like to send me into a gaslit downward spiral, you can do so at Tauri J, TAURIJAY. And thank you again for joining us for this
March into madness.
We will be continuing this through the end of March with something next week, and then I think that's the end of March. I don't remember. I don't know how calendars work. But thank you for joining us this week. We hope that you guys are doing well and taking care of yourselves and you know, quarantining where you need to. You're able to, work from home whenever you can. Or you're rich and you're like, oh man, work, what is that? In that case, send me some money. But yeah, and we will see you next week. Until then, this has been the retrospective that is introspective.
And now you have a new perspective. And also maybe the clap, depending on who you talk to and who was writing the script for this day in your life. We love you. Stay safe.
Right. And you got it consensually.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. You weren't Nick Stiles. You are culpable for your own decisions.
Yeah. You were like, in fact, I want the clap. I need it.